Welcome back to the second video for the certification exam rapid training. This is focused in on developing Azure compute solutions. So again, this is 25 to 30% of the exam. We're going to look at implementing IaaS solutions. So we're going to key in on virtual machine scale sets, and the various IaaS solutions that we have on the platform. Creating Azure App Service web apps. So we really want to understand what we can do in terms of app service, including web apps. So we're going to be looking at app service deeply, and then Azure Functions. So our venture into serverless in terms of programming. So starting out, we're going to look at virtual machines. So the key to VMs is understanding how to create them, provisioning the VM, how to use and create and distribute virtual machines. So the key here is really looking at creating a VM from the portal, get hands-on essentially with creating VMs, whether it be from the CLI, from PowerShell. You could even do it through the API and understand, of course, the RESTful APIs that we have within Azure. So you really want to understand those pieces in terms of provisioning, as well as that we have marketplace images. Another key studying area is the components. When you provision a virtual machine, what does that include? The VM, of course, includes storage, compute, memory, and networking. And understand that those various components are actually tied directly to the SKU or the size of that virtual machine. So the SKU, you may actually deploy a virtual machine that you need additional IOPS for, say, storage, or even more throughput for networking, whereas you don't really need the compute. So you're going to create a virtual machine that has the appropriate information across statistics across those. So when we're looking at virtual machines, understand the various types as well. There's the dedicated host and spot instances. And of course, spot instances, you really need to understand eviction policies, how they apply, and the usage of spot. Where would you use spot in terms of a developer using a workload on a spot instance? So you notice we really don't discuss high availability, disaster recovery, some of those other topics, especially deep diving into virtual machine scale sets. Those are more for the AZ 104 exam. So you're going to really focus there. As a developer, again, we want to keep in mind that we're a developer using a virtual machine. How does this impact our applications is really what you're looking at and focusing on. So when you're studying for the exam, keep that in mind. The areas, though, to understand is how to provision a virtual machine with these various methods, and then the various items that compose a virtual machine. So you really want to focus in on those areas and how you're going to deploy your various workloads to the various types of virtual machines. So another aspect is I highly advise you go to Microsoft Learn. There's an excellent learning module to take you and walk you through deploying a virtual machine with these various methods. The various VM categories. Do we need to know all the various SKUs? No. You need to really understand the different types of virtual machines that can be offered. Again, think of it from a developer perspective. We're focused in on the workload. We really want to understand the various virtual machine types. So there's various virtual machines for various workload types. You need to basically understand all these various virtual machine types. So I kind of deep dive here. This shows the different machine types and their descriptions. You just really don't need to memorize SKUs. You really want to focus in on, the processing power, memory, storage, capacity needs. Again, back to those components and how they're going to affect your various workloads. ARM templates. Do understand the structure and syntax of the ARM template, meaning the basic schema, content version, et cetera, et cetera. Do understand that they can be nested and that you can use these templates, these JSON templates from the portal, PowerShell, REST APIs, GitHub, Cloud Shell. You can capture them directly in the portal And I would highly advise that you look at the template to understand these various sections and see what's inside of the section when you provision something inside of Azure. So understand they can be, again, nested, modular. They have various capabilities in terms of the different features inside of each of the various areas. So as a developer, we need to understand how to provision our workloads, and we need to understand the various ARM template parameters. Also, ARM templates can be nested. Nesting of ARM templates is a capability. So we could actually have multiple nested templates, one that's, say, focused on a SQL database, as well as an app service and a virtual machine. So we could have different templates and nest those accordingly. Another area is Docker images. The key here is understanding the instruction sets. What are the instruction sets and how do I use those? For instance, the from instruction sets the container image that will be used during the new image creation process. So it's really key to understand the various instruction sets and how you form a Docker file. Also understand how to create a base image in terms of Docker commands. So we're going to look at the Azure Container Registry as well, and how our images are actually going to be stored there. But we need to understand the various Docker commands and how they relate to our images. So speaking of the Azure Container Registry, again, we're going to focus in on publishing and using images. So we really need to understand how to publish and use a base image, and understand that we can lock them for immutability. Webhooks are prevalent across a lot of the services, but we can respond to specific events in ACR, or Azure Container Registry, by webhooks. And do focus in on ACR tasks. This is a newer area with our GitHub acquisition. And ACR tasks is a suite of features within Azure Container Registry that allows us to do essentially container image building for various platforms. So really focus in on this area, different types of tasks, how to handle those tasks and create those tasks. And I've put some links inside the deck, which you can also download, that goes deeper into this area. Azure Container Instance. Think of this as a single instance of a container, or burstable capability from Azure Kubernetes service. So this is also a combination of being able to burst from Kubernetes with the virtual kubelet, as well as creating a single instance that you can make IP addressable. You can run Linux and Windows containers, and you really want to focus in for the exam on what this service is and how to host a single instance container. It's actually very straightforward once you walk through ACI and you see how to host the single instance containers. Excellent service. So Azure Service Web Apps. Hopefully by now you've had a chance to dive into web apps in Azure App Service in total. Do understand how to create an app service. What does it mean to create an app service? Do I need an app service plan? And what does that entail when I create an app service, either from the CLI, PowerShell, or the portal? You're always going to see those three combination. And of course, we have Cloud Shell, but CLI, PowerShell, and portal. You can enable and disable diagnostics, so on an app service. So understand that capability and understand what the diagnostics is actually capturing. Also settings, you can store SSL API connection string type settings for applications. Understand those capabilities. Deployment slots, very important concept. So you really want to look into deployment slots and how you can do slot swapping, some of those key features. Do know what an ALC is, or an app service environment, and what that provides you in terms of dedicated environment for isolation. A lot of key areas there around PCI compliance and some compliancy. So understand what an app service environment can bring in terms of your solution and when you're running your workloads. Azure Functions. Again, we're looking at serverless. You really want to focus in on input and output bindings. What does it mean to create a binding, which is a declarative way to connect your data from code connecting to other services? So in other words, blob storage as an example. You can respond to blob storage events with input and output bindings, as well as function triggers, the combination of the function trigger. Understanding durable functions and then function proxies, and understand that functions can be written in a multitude of languages. It's not just C#.NET. You can write them in Java, PHP, Python, JavaScript, etc. So really quick, in terms of triggers and bindings, they let you avoid hard coding the details of the services you're working with. Your function receives data in the function parameters, and you can send data by using the return value of the function. So in C# and a C# script, alternative ways to send data are out parameters and collector objects as an example. So you really focus in on the function app being the center here and enabled by various services. You have your bindings and your output bindings. So you may have an event that occurs, the function may run, and then output data to another service. So you could actually respond to a blob being stored, have a function app process that blob, and then put that into, say, data lake or another service, even another blob if you wanted to. So really quick practice question. You develop and deploy an Azure App Service web app. The web app is secured by using Azure Active Directory and Azure App Service authentication. You need to access the user claim object. What should you use? We're going to use role-based access control, RBAC, HTTP request header values, the Microsoft Graph API, or cross-origin request sharing cores. And the answer is HTTP request header values. I have a link in here that talks about accessing user claim objects, but they are passed with Azure Active Directory as HTTP request header values. So as a developer, you need to understand where to access these objects in terms of authentication authorization. Real quick practice question once again. And this concludes this video, and thank you for your time. And we'll follow up with developing for Azure storage.